Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I'm Tim.
Tim, I'm Luke.
And Luke.
Don't know if you know that.
I did know that. Hi, Luke. How are you today?
Picked up. Okay, good. Yeah, not too bad. What's the word?
The word is we have finished the third week of the NFL football season. And 3 weeks in the books, as we say here on the Half Yard Line podcast. It appears that we know absolutely nothing about football whatsoever. Some
Correct.
upsets again this week of teams I would never have predicted, and not because the team that got beat was so good, but the team that did the beating was bad. It was just bad, or at least we thought they were bad. I think they're still bad. Who knows? Arizona with the big win over Dallas, Indianapolis with the win over Baltimore. A whole lot of things happened in that game.
As well.
We'll touch on a couple of them later. Yeah, which is craziness. Things that just shouldn't happen happening. Yeah. But they did.
With a backup quarterback.
Such as the NFL.
The whole shebang.
We also had, I think, and we will talk plenty about this, some teams that beat their opponents handily. So last week we talked about the art of the comeback. The art of when you're down by a lot of points, not losing by a lot more points. This week we will dissect the art of the blowout. We will also, of course, crown the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week. We will touch on a couple of neat little topics that we found interesting from week 3, and then we will send you on your way, fine listener. But before we do any of those things, please do check us out on YouTube. We're on YouTube now. If you're following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music.
My mom.
Any of those.
My mom won't watch
love
this,
it. You're welcome.
That's what people say.
Keep doing it. We're welcome to follow us on your favorite podcast app. However, check us out on YouTube now. I will say YouTube does count the views. We need to convert more of you to YouTube viewers so we quit looking so silly on the little view counter. But do check us out. You get to see our beautiful faces while you listen to our beautiful voices. And my mom told me when I was a child that I had a face for radio, and I think she was right. So,
well, YouTube didn't exist back then, so she didn't know what was yet to come.
This is true. So, without any further ado, though, Luke, we would be remiss. We try very hard on this podcast not to just be, here's what happened in week 3. There's plenty. First of all, we don't publish till Wednesday. If by Wednesday you don't know what happened in week 3, you're probably not a huge football podcast fan. You guys have probably figured out that's not our ball of wax. But sometimes things happen, and when they happen, you just can't ignore them. And by that, of course, I mean Taylor Swift went to the football game with Travis. No, I kid. The Miami Dolphins.
Nicely done.
The Miami Dolphins hang up a 70 burger, as I've heard it referred.
Tim, before we go any further.
Yeah.
Can you name me a Taylor Swift song?
I can't. I have.
Does not Shake It Off. Okay.
Oh, just I know Shake It Off.
Shake It Off.
I don't know that I would have been able to tell you it was Taylor Swift. I am not a pop music guy. Certainly not a country pop music guy. I listen sometimes. I have no idea who's singing anything. I'm not your guy. I'm sorry. Yeah. Hate me. Whatever.
I'm not ashamed to say it, Tim. Not ashamed to say it. I'm not a Swiftie, I wouldn't say, because that requires a certain level of dedication that I think a man in his 30s isn't probably capable of. But I am a fan of T Swizz and her tunes, so good for her getting in the end. It's a nice crossover point for me to be like, well, so the Swift fans are coming to me. It'd be like football fans going to the concert. There's a nice meeting of the minds there, and I'm enjoying that. And I'm sure it's definitely not just a big PR thing to sell more jerseys and more records. I'm sure.
Well, I have heard his jersey's up 400%. And listen, this is Travis Kelce we're talking about here. Travis Kelce, it's not like he wasn't selling jerseys before.
He's in the commercials.
Good for him.
It'd be like if BTS became big Patrick Mahomes fans. BTS are a very popular K-pop group, by the way.
It is. I actually did know. I did know that. So I am a musician. I play music. I enjoy music. I'm not a huge musician fan, if that makes sense. So I like music, but I don't follow
follower
the
of the modern music.
No, I'm not, and that's probably awful of me. But I have defended Taylor Swift and her early in her music career. We're like, well, she's a great songwriter, but she can't sing. I'm like, listen, there's a lot of songwriters out there that write great songs who do not get to go on stage and sing them for millions of people. Clearly, she's doing something right. She's by far of our generation the biggest name. Period. May become one of the biggest names ever if she keeps on the track she's on now. But anyhow, let's stop talking about Taylor Swift because that's not what we do.
Speaking of people who do things exceptionally well, Tim, we're going to talk about Miami.
I would just like everyone to know when I said on the early season preview pod that I thought Miami was going to take a step back and that Tua wasn't the real deal. What I really meant was they were going to set records with their offense. You're welcome, Miami. My lack of belief in you inevitably spurred on the team.
I picked them to win the division. It's one of the few things I feel good about in my preseason predictions, to be honest. So
I did not,
but I got that one, I think, right so far.
But I picked the Patriots. That's going really well. I 70 points, Luke. 70 points. It's very hard, and we're going to talk about why in a minute, to score 70 points. And there are teams that are that much better than their opponent from time to time. And we're going to talk about blowout statistics here in a minute. But there are, from time to time, teams that are just that much better. You've got teams that, they didn't manage the salary cap well. They had a lot of injuries.
It's not a fair fight.
And you just know they're going against the Super Bowl favorite, juggernaut, whatever. And it's going to go ham. But you're going to end up with backups in the game. You're going to end up, nobody's playing the second half. And, to Miami's credit, there was a lot of that going on in this game. But to keep scoring at the rate they were scoring against, listen, I don't care what we love to hate on Denver because they have Russell Wilson. And we love to hate on Russell Wilson, but they have 54 if you count the third quarterback. NFL professional football players,
professionals
on their roster who lace up their shoes every week and practice and lift and run and do all of the things that you're supposed to do as a professional football player. They study their playbooks. They work on their game plans. They have professional coaches and trainers and chefs and nutritionists and
have a good diet. Yeah, all that.
They do all the things.
Tim.
And yet you give up 70 points to a team who was playing. I mean, you only get to dress, was it 45? Is it 45 players plus the quarter
47?
I don't know.
Possibly.
It ain't 53. Yeah, it's something less than range. 53. So you don't get to dress two guys at every spot, right? That's not how it works. You got special teams, you got a field, you have extra players out there, but
you don't have 8 running backs active and 55 wide receivers.
So you're not sitting everybody who starts, but you're sitting everybody you have somebody to sit, right? There's someone else to go. I mean, they were pulling guys out of the stands by the end. You go in there and take a snap. It's fine. And yet, their last 3 drives went touchdown, downs, and they could have scored on their last drive.
They definitely should have. They definitely
it's a different conversation.
In field goal
Would
range.
You kick it there? You kick it there to set the record. Sure. The record.
Oh, of course I kick
NFL record for points scored is 72. 73 would have been the record.
72.
And they elected to take a knee as opposed to kick the field goal.
Listen, this is a very sports talking head kind of thing. So we won't go too much into this topic, but 100%, I'd kick that ball. I get it. I get the whole, don't want to do, show respect or whatever the right thing to do is. What you've scored 70 points. Respectability is well gone. You've had Mike White through a 70-yard touchdown. You've tried. You've put the backups in. What else do you want me to do? Like, unless you want me to take a knee every snap, if your defense and your team has just completely given up to this degree, and you're going to put us in field goal range, at the end of a game we have absolutely destroyed you in, kick the field goal. Just kick the field goal. Enjoy the fact you're going to set the NFL points record. It's never happened. And you could even, if you wanted to be a complete arse about it, which is what I would have done, someone questions Mike McDaniel after this hypothetical situation where I said, why did you kick a 3-pointer at the end of the game? You'd already won, disrespectful. I'd say, well, listen, we hadn't practiced a field goal all game. So we had to get our reps in. All we'd done is we'd practice some PATs. That's great, but we need to just get the operation
just remember
down.
How to snap it.
You'd say something like in practice this week we struggled with the operation. I just wanted to see the guys run it in a live game setting, get a rep.
No idea there was a record to be had.
It would have been complete bullshit, but it would have been funny, and that's what I would have done. But yes, to your point, Tim, a beatdown the likes of which we have never seen. I mean, 50 points. You lost by 50 points. Mm-hmm. Now, there are very, very few cases of this happening. One near and dear to my heart, which was the Patriots beating the Titans 59-0 in a blizzard in Foxborough, which I remember watching, which was great fun. This was many years ago now. Vince Young.
Great fun's an interesting description.
But losing, allowing 50 points is quite hard, right? Losing by 50 is, that's actually difficult. Like, that's almost commendable.
Rarefied air.
That's commendable. I got a few. I had a few notes from this game. No, please. I was gonna ask you because I'm sure you.
I have all the info. So if you go since the merger, because there were actually quite a few blowouts in the early parts of the NFL.
Yeah. Well, the record is from the 60s, right? 1960 something was the Washington, the Sonny Jurgensen,
that's right. And
Redskins as
and
they were then.
You know, the rules were different about player acquisitions and player movement and there were different resources. You had different level of coaches. You had different. I mean, it was just very different. And so I went with, since the merger, there have been, are you ready? 50 or more point victories, a grand total of 13. Now, this is since 1970. We're talking about 53 years of football.
One every almost, 5-ish years it happens, basically.
And what's funny to me is you look at this list and you look at the teams that are on each side of the coin. There are some repeats, if you would guess. There's only one team who has beat another team by 50 more than once. Any idea who it is?
Steelers Browns.
It is actually, sorry, it's not the same pair, but one team has shown up on the winning side twice. It is New England.
Patriots.
It is New England.
Yeah, I was going to say Patriots,
beating not only one of them in the modern, what I would call really modern era. New England, you already mentioned it, beating the Titans 59-0. The other was beating the Jets 56-3 back in 1979. But the Rams have done it. The Seahawks, New Orleans, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Chicago, St. Louis, and the Dolphins. And this one hurts my heart. Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 51-0
80s?
in 1989.
Yeah. Year of my birth, Tim. Inauspicious for your Steelers.
If you had offered me, if you said you can pick one team who's never beat somebody by 50 points for $1 million, I would have bet the Browns. And if you just said, give me one team who's never been beat by 50, I'd have given you the Steelers. That one hurt my heart in ways that I can't.
Well, that's tough, Tim. But I'll cheer you up. As I said, I made some notes on this game, but I started out with just a section I've called Amusing Facts.
Makes sense.
It's not a feature. It's just,
but it might be
for this game. So the Dolphins in this game had 726 yards of offense, which is the NFL record, as you won't be surprised to hear. 726, I want to just stress that. 726. Two teams have yet to gain 726 yards this season. One of them, you know who it is because I texted you about it, which is my beloved Titans, who suck. 6 yards fewer, Tim, just 720 for the Titans. The Jets have fewer as well, 675. So they're the two teams that have been outgained by the Dolphins in one game. The Bengals have only got 733 yards, so they're only 7 yards ahead of the Dolphins through 3 games, as the Dolphins were in this game. But the funniest thing I found looking this up is Miami obviously now leads the NFL in yards gained, right? That's obvious. If you gain 700, some odd yards, they're number one in yards gained. They're 3-0. They look like, if not Super Bowl favorites, then, certainly contenders for the crown in the AFC in the early going. The second most yards gained is the Chargers, who are 1-2 and really close to being 0-3 at the end of their game. We're not really going to touch on that game, but very nearly lost.
Yeah, Minnesota almost Minnesota, LA, and LA almost LA Minnesota.
Well, they nearly lost to the team who's third on this list. So the third most yards gained this season is the Vikings, who are 0-3.
So gaining lots of yards may not actually lead to winning football games. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I think it more says that the Chargers and Vikings, as teams that are just perennially nearly men, certainly living up to that billing, the fact you're only second and third to Miami, who's just had 700 plus yards of offense, and you're still, as a pair, you're 1-5. But not only on the yards front, Tim, do you know how many teams the Dolphins have outscored? So one game.
Oh.
How many teams do you think have fewer than 70 points through 3 games?
3 games, so you're averaging 23 a game to get there. 12?
18.
18.
So more than half of the league has yet to score 70 points.
Wow.
In total. through 3 games, and the Dolphins scored 70 in one game. There's a thing that happens in soccer, which you may or may not be aware of, Tim, but some of our listeners in the US won't be. When a team scores a certain number of goals, so you get, it's 3-0, 4-0, that's nil meaning 0, just for full translation purposes. When it gets above 6, they used to, in the old days, put the word in brackets so that people wouldn't think the 7 was like a 1, because it just rarely happens. So they put 7 brackets SEVEN or 8 brackets
just in case you were wondering. Yes,
EIGHT.
they really have scored.
So I feel like this is a game you really should have rolled that out. Say 70 brackets SEVENTY close brackets. A historic beatdown, as we say. Those are my amusing facts. I've got one more for you, which will kind of drag us into more looking at the game itself. The Dolphins called 43 runs in this game, 43 runs to 28 passes in total. Do you know what their yards per carry was?
The yards per carry
43
on their 43
attempts.
Of course, knowing what I know about this, it's got to be more than 5. I'm going to say 7.5.
It was 8.1 yards per carry on 43 carries in total. And they had a few negative runs too. It was like watching Alabama play like Northwest Missouri State. That's the kind of stat line you get in those games, when the college cupcake games, right? Where Alabama puts in its 5th running back who's like better than everyone on your team. It was one of the rare occasions where, teams talk about this, like, we're just going to keep doing it till you stop it. That Miami actually did that. Like, most teams don't do this, especially teams with whiz-bang offensive coordinators with fast, receivers who get excited about passing. No. Mike McDaniel said, well, it turns out if we just give the ball to our 2 running backs, they will keep gaining yards. And they basically gained yards.
Sorry, I have to correct you. I have to correct you.
For the whole
because it's one of
game.
My favorite stats about this game. They didn't give the ball to their 2 running backs. They gave their ball to 3 different running backs because
sorry, I was saying before it got out of hand.
3 running backs.
The other running back still gained like 10 yards.
Gained more than 5 yards or 50 yards. 3 running backs in this game averaged more than 6 yards per carry on at least 9 attempts each. No. Okay, hang on. It gets better. 2 running backs in this game had 50-yard runs or longer, neither of which were the starting running back, Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, Chris Brooks, right, who I've never heard of.
Chris
who isn't this week's Jonas Gray Player of the Week, by the way, for those wondering. Because frankly, achieving this in this game is not a feat. Like, this is not a feat. Interestingly, Jonas Gray was against the Dolphins, so there you go. There's some form for this. But on the running backs front, the reason I brought that up, Tim, is the second drive of this game. So this is before it's wild, super crazy, points out the ass. They had 9 plays on the drive for 81 yards, resulted in a touchdown. The distribution of touches on this drive, I felt like, really tells you what was going to happen when you look back on it. Right, hindsight's 20/20, but it went Mostert, A-chain, Mostert, A-chain, Mostert, Hill, 8-yard catch, A-chain, touchdown. That was the drive. So they just went, we got 9 plays. We're going to have 8 of those go to our running backs. Some of those were runs, some of those were passes. But Denver in this game, just, we're having fun, but on a tactical standpoint, right? If you were going to look at this game and like try and coach, I mean, God forbid, that defensive meeting is going to be.
Do you even watch the game? I mean, you might just shred it, right?
Can you imagine being in the defensive meeting on Monday morning going, guys, we got to watch the tape of this game, and you're just sitting there going, I'm going to get cut. The Denver Broncos in this game, I have never, ever seen a team fail to set the edge of a defense at this level this much for this long. Like, usually it happens and teams start doing like when it gets ridiculous, they just start putting like outside linebackers outside the defensive ends and stuff. Not only could they not set the edge, anytime someone went in like the B or the C gap, they just bounced it to the edge straight away, and Denver had no one there. It happened again and again. And when Miami was completing these passes I mentioned on that drive, they were all like swing passes, flare passes, bench routes, whatever you want to, call some of these routes out of the backfield. It wasn't like they were running crazy concept there. They ran a lot of pre-snap motion, and that's what really caused the problem for Denver. Like, the linebackers were all over the place. The front 7 didn't know where anyone was. Guys were running into each other. Guys were losing dudes out the backfield. And then once this team, Miami, gets its foot in the ground collectively, everyone is so fast, you just can't catch up to them. We saw the long runs with A-Chain, with Mostert. You saw Hill break a couple of long plays. everyone is lightning quick. So if you're in a blender pre-snap, which Mike McDaniel is doing, I think they're something like 60% of their plays, they have someone in motion as the ball is snapped, which is kind of a new wrinkle that most teams aren't doing. It's kind of a CFL almost thing, like Canadian football.
Yeah, or even Arena League, yeah.
But Denver just couldn't set the edge. So the outside of every play was just wide open. So Mostert would get the ball. He'd just cut to the right or to the left. There'd be a huge hole. A-Chain would catch the ball out of the backfield. He'd put his foot in the ground, run in a straight line, and there would just be no one standing there. Like, to see it happen that frequently, if you're Sean Payton, right, Vance Joseph is the DC there now, you must look at that and go, I almost don't even know what to say. Like, at some point, this is just, I'm going to make you sit here and watch this. Like, you know, the end of A Clockwork Orange where they matchstick his eyes open and make him watch like the horrible movie.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine the defensive meeting room was. I mean, just to put a capper on it, the leading tackler in this game, bear in mind, we've just said they had 43 rushing attempts in this game. The leading tackler for Denver was a safety. It's not what you want.
No,
Tim.
That's not good. That is not. You know what else you don't want? You don't want,
please,
you don't want to give up a 68-yard touchdown pass to Mike White throwing to some guy named Robbie Chosen.
White. Well, the artist formerly known as Chosen Anderson, the artist formerly known as Robbie Anderson.
I mean, so my God.
I mean, the worst thing about that play, Tim, do you know who was covering Robbie Anderson Chosen on this play?
Not.
Patrick Surtain II. So your best,
I would argue he was not covering him.
No, that's true. But your best corner is as if it's not been embarrassing enough.
Yeah.
Your like all pro level cornerback gets burned on a double move by Robbie Anderson and Mike White. I mean, everyone loved Mike White when he was playing for the Jets. You know, that rock'em sock'em Maverick. But yeah. No, not great. I mean, I said this to you before you came on air, Tim. I think I kind of pinpointed the moment this game really got out of hand and where the Broncos kind of surrendered. Because frankly, the score can't happen unless one team just completely gives up. You know, at the end of the first half, it was 21-10 and Miami had just turned the ball over on downs.
Yep.
4:47 left in the first half. So, you know, that's fine. You know, we get downfield, we score any points. It's a one-score game. Very soon thereafter, it was 35-10. And it was the play for 28-10 that really summed it up. Mostert got the ball. There's a huge hole on the right side of the defense. A linebacker just runs up and basically collides with him. Doesn't really wrap up, try and tackle anything. Mostert just bounce off him, sprints into the end zone, 28-10. Next Broncos drive, Cortland Sutton fumbles. Then they score again, and obviously at that point it's completely done. But the 28-10 play I just thought looked like the moment at which the Denver defense said, we're good.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right, Luke, though. I want to, you mentioned something there that I think must be emphasized. And that is, it was 21-10, and the Denver Broncos defense had just gotten the Miami Dolphins high-powered offense, which, by the way, started the game touchdown, touchdown, touchdown to turn the ball over on downs. Okay, so you have, theoretically, this is your opportunity. You got momentum. You finally stop this guy. All you got to do is go out there, and what do? 3 plays, -7 yards, and a punt. When they punted that football, there were 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the half. When Miami runs their first play, there are 3 minutes and 9 seconds left in the half. And in that 3 minutes and 9 seconds, Miami scores a touchdown, forces a fumble, scores a second touchdown. And ironically, then allows Denver to kick a field goal. There were 3 scores and a turnover in the last 3 minutes of the first half. I mean,
just brutal.
It's absolutely brutal. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a beatdown in this podcast. And this game almost has sort of the complete trifecta, superfecta, if you will, right? So we're going to talk about teams where one unit lets the team down. And because that one unit lets the team down, it puts tons of pressure on everyone else. And ultimately, it becomes a ship that can't sail anymore. We're going to talk about games where there's a crazy stretch of plays where it's just crazy things happen to everybody. You know, guy steps out of the back of the end zone, guy snaps the ball over the quarterback's head, just crazy wacky plays, and you get a series of them, and all of a sudden it's 28-0 in 3 minutes or something. And then you've got My team's just better than your team. And then you've got one team just gives up, mails it in, says, I'm going home, and the score gets out of hand. We had all of those in this game. Miami is clearly better than Denver. I mean, they're just better. Denver clearly gave up. We've got 14 points in the last 3 minutes of the first half, and we've got Denver's defensive front seven completely incapable of setting the edge against Miami.
No sacks either. No sacks.
Did
just
nothing.
To really put a cap on
nothing.
That, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So it's just wild that you see all of those things in this one game.
No, for sure. We can pick up on a couple other examples because I think we've talked for long enough about this game, although we could do hours on it because there's a lot to talk about. It's a lot of points. But one thing I want to just mention, just as a maybe something to put a pin in for future weeks for us, Broncos 0-3, as we said. This game, analysis be damned. You just completely shit yourselves, basically. The Broncos offense is also quite bad, and it's going to get swept under the rug because they got blown out and the defense takes the.
Well, they scored 20 points. 20 points is enough to be in a 20 game. Points.
And if you look at the statistics on Russell Wilson, it's been better than last year. Blah blah blah. There's been some thought that there are points wise in the second half this year in 3 games. The Broncos have scored 22 points in 3 games. Right, 7 of those points. Were from 6 of those points plus the PAT were from a 99-yard kick return, which was in this game, and another 6 were on a Hail Mary last play of the game desperation heave. So that is not good. So you're telling me that the Broncos offense really forget the Hail Mary because that's just luck. You scored 9 points in 3 games in the second half. Just one to put a pin in before we move on. But yeah, this was historic. This was amusing. This was everything we want for podcast fodder, and that's why I've spent 20 odd minutes talking about
Luke,
this game.
I've just got to. We've had a request. It must be done. The drive chart. Yes,
listener Dom has been in touch. He of the drive charts, and he's requested Tim to read the drive charts for the Dolphins in this game, which I think we can all certainly enjoy.
I'm actually going to read them both because they're both worth.
Are you going to read them both? Okay.
So we're going to start with the Broncos. Week, to be honest,
guys, get a cup of tea. Pause the podcast. Get a coffee. This is going to be a while.
There were more drives in this game than there are in most, seasons.
Yeah.
So here's the Broncos. Okay, it doesn't start out so bad. Punt.
It starts okay.
Not great, but hey, first drive happens. Touchdown, field goal. From that moment, we have punt, fumble, field goal, punt, fumble, interception, punt, touchdown on the kick return, downs. And that's it. The offense did absolutely nothing the rest of the game.
The worst thing about that is you go the sequences, you've got like punt, fumble, something, and then you've got punt, fumble, something again. It's like, no, don't do punt, fumble twice in a row. Stop doing punt, fumble.
Punt, fumble, field goal, which was the first one, was much better than punt, fumble, interception, which was the second one.
Jeez. Okay, now get the Dolphins. This is great. This is great. This is content, Tim. This is hashtag content
of football. Touchdown, downs, touchdown, end of half. Touchdown, punt, touchdown, downs. Taking a knee in field goal range at the end of the game.
They scored 10 touchdowns in a game, Tim. 10. 10.
Why not?
Amazing. But yeah, listener Dom, I hope that suffice is your desire for drive chart reading. If anyone out there has any requests for the pod, at halfyardlinepod on all the socials, get in touch, halfyardlinepod@gmail.com if you would so be inclined. But Tim, we're going to move on now. You talked about it at the top. We're talking about kind of anatomy of the blowout, dissection of the destruction, whatever you want to call it.
I like that.
Maybe we'll call it that. It was quite good.
That was great.
Although it's a bit long-winded. Anyway, you mentioned Denver kind of hit every particular note that you need to lose a game by a lopsided score. What kind of thematic thing do you want to touch on now in terms of other blowouts? Because there were a couple this week as well, which kind of relate back to some we've seen earlier in the season, even in its infancy.
Well, before we even get into the specific themes, and I do think they're really interesting, it was crazy to think about how many there were this week, and I don't want to undersell that. When you and I talked about, hey, what should we talk about on the pod this week? We kept saying, well, there's blowouts. And I wanted to know, it felt like a lot of blowouts, but how many blowouts is normal, right? We talk about NFL being the league of parity. And at first you have to say, well, what's a blowout? And that's completely subjective and you could make it up. I decided to go with more than more than 3 touchdowns. We used 23 points because that was a nice divisor for this year. You could say 24, you could say 28, say 30, whatever your number is, we use 23. And so when you use the number of 3 or 23 points or more points differential in the final outcome of the game being a blowout, there were 4 in week 3. Now, just in case everybody doesn't know, there's 32 teams, 16 games, 4 this week, which is 25% last time I checked. That still sound like good math to you?
Yep, it's good. It's good math.
All right. I looked historically over time from the merger to today. The average blowout percentage is like 12. So we had twice as many blowouts in week 3 as you do in an average NFL season. We are a bit above average for the year, which you would think if you had. There was only 1 in week 2. We had 2 in week 1. So 7 total on the year so far, given the games that have been played, the 64 games that have been played. That's not the right number. 16, 32, 48. The 48 games 48. That have been played. There it is.
We had the math right the first time, so we were due one.
There you go. So it is not common that you see this many. There have been more. There have been 5 weeks that had 5. There have been 1 week with a 6 and 1 week with 7 blowouts, and that was back when there were only 28 teams. So that was a full half of the games ended in a blowout. So we weren't. This wasn't quite a historic week for blowouts, but we did see almost every type of blowout you can have. And the first one that I want to start with, because I think it's the one people generally think of in a blowout, is that kind of garden variety. Your team's better than my team. Not a fair fight. You see this again. We talked about it. You got teams that just absolutely got destroyed by something, whether it be injuries. It reminds me back to the COVID game where Denver had to start a wide receiver at quarterback. You have either
Kendall Hinton, respect on his name.
Of course, worked really well for them. You had
it's better than Tebow. Maybe not.
The Rams last year, everybody was hurt. You had, that happens.
You get these end of season, like the 5th string quarterbacks in, or they've had like 10 left tackles go down.
That or sometimes it's salary season. Cap. Like you did so bad at the salary cap, you've had to cut everybody. Who knows?
You would think there's cause for hope. There's teams that you maybe think are going to improve, and that everyone's a bit rusty. Maybe that's more of an equalizer, but not so really in this game in particular.
No, not so. And I think there were sort of there was one game to me this week that really exemplified that outcome, and that was Kansas City and their thorough destruction of the Bears. And this one was almost prototypical. Like if you were going to design the outcome, right? There was one kind of wild card. We'll talk about that in a minute, but they come out early, with the exception of the punt on the first drive. The Chiefs go touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, field goal to finish the first half. Exactly.
Finish the first
what
half. You would think, just to be clear, that's one half of
from
football.
A Patrick Mahomes led offense against the defense that, let's be honest, the Bears are struggling a little bit this year. The Bears, they gained some yards. It wasn't like they were turning the ball over every possession. They had 4 plays for 21 yards and a punt. They had 7 plays for 31 yards and a punt, 5 plays for 22 yards and a punt. They're not doing anything crazy yet in this game. That changes in a minute, but where they're, letting the other team score an inordinate number of points in a brief period of time, where, they're giving up huge chunk plays.
Yeah, it wasn't like 3 pick sixes in a row or something.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Or every time turnovers you get the ball, in your own end.
We can't. Yeah, we can't stop
We can't stop you, and we can't get enough first downs to score ourselves. Right? That's when it's kind of, all right, this game is not going to change.
Yeah, we're playing out the string from a very early point in this game, right?
That's right. And very often in those cases, and that was the case in this game, the Chiefs up 34-0 at the half in their first drive of the second half score, again to make it 41-0, and then in come all of the
Blaine Gabbert et al.
Exactly.
I said this to you, Tim. I was watching this game live, and they cut away, for those who don't watch football, maybe in the US or don't watch it live all the time on networks, when a game is non-competitive, the network says, well, we're now going to cut away from this game and show you something else because frankly,
no
this
one
is
wants
boring.
to watch this. Yeah.
Usually, fourth quarter backups
Late
are in,
fourth quarter.
backups are in. It's like halftime. They cut away from this game at halftime, which I've never seen. I've never ever seen a game cut away from that early ever.
No.
Ever. I was texting my brother and I was like, this is actually quite hard to watch. Like by the time it got to 31, I was like, it was kind of like watching, so it's like the NFL equivalent of like a snuff film. Like, should I be watching this? Like, this feels like it should
dirty.
be illegal.
Like I should look away.
This is like, do I need to go on the dark web to watch the second half of this game? Because it's literally the most painful, like, beating you can imagine in a way which was, like you say, not crazy plays, not ridiculousness. It was just, no, we're really good. You suck. And all we're going to do is put this game away nice and early and make sure that you have no hope of coming back. I mean, the Bears scored later in the game after Blaine Gabbert threw an interception to them. So it wasn't like they were marching down second half and they made it close.
Right. And that's where to me, it comes across as the we're just better than you, is when Kansas City switched to the backups, all of this. Now, listen, Chicago's not trying to kick field goals. They're playing the game differently than they would have if they weren't trailing by 41 points. But they started moving the ball. They had an 11-play drive that ultimately was shortened by some penalties and a sack. They had the touchdown drive. They had, they were moving the ball better against the backups on defense, and they were stopping the Chiefs' offense. They had Blaine Gabbert threw 2 interceptions. Say what you want about Blaine Gabbert, you still have to catch the ball. You have to create a defensive look that he'll throw it into. So against the backups, the Bears were competitive. And, to me, it's another, they didn't mail it in. They didn't give up. They just weren't good enough. And, that's one thing. The second,
it happens.
Yeah, it happens. The second type of beatdown that I want to bring up now, and I use it here because this game gives us an opportunity to transition because you saw this as well. And that's the crazy stretch of plays beatdown. So this game isn't necessarily non-competitive from A to Z. This one was, but generally speaking, that when this happens, it's not non-competitive from A to Z. And we see this in another game this week, which we'll talk about next. But at the end of the first half, Kansas City is kicking off to Chicago with how much time left? I want to make sure I get this right. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Touchback. So with 3 minutes and 5 seconds to go in the first half, the Bears have the ball. 3 minutes and 5 seconds, the Bears have the ball. Kansas City scored 3 more times that half. Three more times. I can't. My God. You have that's
actually like how do you even have the time
when you don't have the ball?
Yeah,
it's unbelievably bad. It's absolutely. And so Chicago fumbles in their own end.
Yeah.
Casey kicks a field goal. The very next drive, they're trying to do too much because they're trailing by a lot of points. They throw an interception that ends up as a touchdown going the other way. It wasn't a pick six, but they scored a touchdown on the ensuing drive. And then they go 3 quick plays trying to create something and end up gaining nothing and having to kick the ball back to Kansas City, who drives the length of the field to kick another field goal. In 3 minutes. All that happened in 3 minutes.
Yeah, there's the meme, which is from a Simpsons episode where one of the kids is just going, stop, he's already dead. And that's pretty much what you felt like watching the end of the first half of this game. You mentioned that this, we mentioned it in the Miami game as well, right? Like you have the stretch of plays where it's just like, what the heck? Like the wheels came off the wagon in a hurry. And that's certainly a theme that you see in the beatdowns. The good team beats the bad team by a lot. We see that, right? That's garden variety. That's usual NFL business. But the ones where the game just spirals quick, you can be a fan of the team that gets on the bad end of that and just go, what?
Just happened?
We were in this game 5 minutes ago, and now we're getting ass whipped, and I don't really remember any in between. It's almost like you blacked out for 2 minutes, you came back, and you were like, what happened?
I've done that. I've fallen asleep on the couch and woken up and going, I'm sorry, what happened? And there's not a game that exemplifies that better this week than Commanders Bills. And listen, I go ahead and write your hate mail. I understand the Bills are better than the Commanders. However, I picked the Commanders to win their division, and so I'm going to...
Mandos.
But in the middle of this game, not even the middle, towards the end of this game, it is 16-0. And it is 16-0.
Which isn't good.
No, but it's not insurmountable.
Clear, it's not good. It's 2 scores.
Yeah, with 11 minutes to go in the game. With 11 minutes to go in the game, it is a 2-score game. Okay? And then immediately thereafter, Buffalo scores a touchdown. The next drive is a pick 6, not 3 plays later from the Commanders. And you look up and all of a sudden it's 30-0 with 10 minutes to go. So at 11 minutes to go, it's a 2-score game. I need to score now and get going. With 1 minute later, 1 minute on the clock later, it is 30-0.
Yeah, it was even more brutal than that. Because like it's similar to what we were saying, Miami, right? Like Denver turned Miami over on downs, and you think, okay, we're getting beaten by a better team, but maybe this is the moment, right? We get the ball back, we stop this offense, which has kind of been on us today. Like you say, 16-0 Bills. The Commanders turn it over on downs. They stop Buffalo, and you think, right, not 15-ish.
Here we go.
Under 15 minutes left because it's the fourth quarter. Let's maybe do something. Let's go. Momentum is on our side. Maybe they literally fumbled it on the next snap of the game. It's like,
whoops.
So you've just done the hard bit. It's like when you force late in the game when you force a punt and then the guy muffs the punt. It's like that, but you actually had the ball on offense. You fumbled the ball, then you set 23-0, then Howell makes a bad decision, pick 6, and 4 minutes, 18 seconds, end to end that was. So in 4 minutes, 18 seconds, you went from 14-0 to 30-0, and then by then it's obviously game over, spelled
Indeed.
OVA. I mean, I lavished Sam Howell with praise last week in the comeback victory against the Broncos. Neither of us, to be clear, said before the season or have since said that the Broncos are going to be any good.
No.
But I thought Howell played really well. Hung tough in the pocket, made good decisions, ripped a couple of really nice passes, and he rewarded me by in this game having an absolute stinker.
Yeah, not good.
Which really began on the first drive where he's holding, first down from the Buffalo 25. First down, he's holding the ball for too long. He gets sacked. They lost 9 yards. The second down, he holds the ball too long. They lost 2 yards. Now he's out of field goal range after the sack. Then on the third down, he threw an interception. So it's like, don't compound errors. We talked about plays getting out of hand. I feel like when that happened to Sam Howell, it's almost like the game suddenly starts to get really, really fast. If you're a quarterback, when you're making mistakes, the windows start to look really, really small. I got to force it. I got to do something. It was, he threw 4 picks. They were all bad picks to throw. And those plays at the end of the fourth quarter or towards the end of the game just took this from being Buffalo are better. Washington gave it a go. Offense wasn't there on the day these things happened to. We got absolutely killed, and it did not take very long for that to happen. And that's something that we've seen in the NFL many a time, Tim, and we've seen it this season, certainly with these kind of spiraling sudden events where you go,
whoops. Yep, no, that's exactly right, Luke. That's what happens. I do think it's worth noting that we talk about this one as a stretch of plays, and it was a stretch of plays changed the score and made it a winnable game to a non-winnable game. The Buffalo beat these guys pretty handily. I mean, they had 9 sacks and 4 picks and a fumble recovery. I mean, 5 turnovers and 9 sacks is pretty much going to get you a game against anybody.
Yeah, it should probably do the job, shouldn't it?
It should. And so, but that's sort of the crazy stretch of plays, right? And that happened. I mean, it happened. It's happened to the Steelers against the Browns twice, once in the playoffs and once outside the playoffs, where all of a sudden it happened to us against Jacksonville in the playoffs, where your offense is trying to get a little too cute, and you throw a pick 6, and then you snap the ball over the guy's head, and in the ensuing possessions in between, Cleveland scored. And so all of a sudden you've got it's 21 or 28-0, and it's been 5 minutes, and you're like, well, okay, this one's over. Really, I mean, you can't spot the other team 30 points. And when that happens, you almost have to chalk it up to, well, okay,
that's
on to the next.
Bad day in the office, right?
Those aren't indicative, right, of there is a bit of luck. Right? Of course, you make your own luck.
It's the bounce of the ball game, right?
Yeah, and or just brain farts. I mean, the Gunnar Olszewski, been returning punts for years, catches a kickoff going out of bounds and does a toe touch to stay in, and we end up with the ball on the 12-yard line instead of the 40. Like, what? It just brain fart. These things happen. and they happen to the best guys out there. And so you see that from time to time. So that's sort of that bucket. The last bucket that we saw this week, and we saw it a little bit in Denver with the defense, is when one unit, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, the offensive line is often guilty. Occasionally it's special teams will do this occasionally too. You'll give up, you have a blocked field goal return for a touchdown and 2 kick return touchdowns.
Yeah,
You're like,
two
oh my God, how did our,
yeah, exactly.
yeah. And so occasionally you'll see it with the special teams, but often it's the offensive line. And what happens when it's the offensive line is one team can't block, and so they can't run and they can't throw because they can't block. And so often you want to set up the play action pass. That only works. The running game's working. Now you got to throw quick, short routes that the defense can just sit on. The line's pinning the ears back and coming after you. And you end up having really short drives. And those really short drives give the ball back to the other team. Now your defense has to drop back on the field. They spend the entire first half, the entire first 2/3 of the game on the field. You get beat time of possession by 15 minutes, 17 minutes, 20 minutes. And, your defense just can't sustain. Even if you've got a good defense or you're playing well in the other phases of the game, at some point, the fatigue factor just sets in, and it's not fair. And we saw one of those this week, and we won't spend too much time on it.
Speaking of which,
because I know it'll be a little difficult for you, but your Tennessee Titans, after the big come from behind victory last week, sort of led you to believe maybe the Titans had figured it out on offense a little bit. 3 whole points on offense in this game, and I think really emblematic of that offensive line type game where you can't protect the quarterback. Gave up 5 sacks on a guy who's not holding the ball. Ryan Tannehill is not a hold the ball quarterback, but you still, you give up 5 sacks. You got the best running back in football. A lot of people would say average 1.8 yards per carry on 11 carries, 14 rushes in total. You go, God, they must have given away only 25 passes. And in a game you were trailing the whole time, only ran 45 offensive plays, including the 5 sacks. That's tough. For an offense to get that many plays compared to the almost double that on the other side of the field.
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins this weekend, I mentioned outgained the Titans on the season. The Titans in this game gained 94 yards on offense in total, which is 7.7 times. If you took times that by 7.7, you get the Dolphins total. That's how big the disparity was. And yeah, you're right. You see games where offensive line just goes to pieces, and the offensive line is the best. It's at its best for any team when you don't hear anything about them, right? There's a reason they're unsung heroes. There's a reason that they don't often get the glory. It's because when you don't hear the guy's name, he's doing his job. He hasn't got beat for a sack. He's not been called for a holding penalty. He's not done something stupid, miss a block, that kind of stuff, right? In this game, all you heard was offensive line this player that, and it's like, this is not good. So, if you hear the defensive line's names being called constantly, it's not the best. Now, Myles Garrett, one of, if not the best edge rusher in the entire league. He's awesome. Take nothing away from him. Absolutely ate the Titans' lunch from the jump. I mean, they had 5 sacks in this game, the Browns. That really doesn't tell you the sheer level of domination that the Browns front exerts over the Titans' offensive line. Couldn't stop them, couldn't block them going forwards, couldn't block in run blocking, couldn't block them going backwards in pass protection. There was just a whole lot of nothing. I mean, the Titans' offensive line gets overwhelmed to this degree. Any team's offensive line gets overwhelmed to this degree. You can't do anything. Titans average 2.1 yards per play. Per play. That's not going to get the pigs in, as they would say back in my home country. When you have a team that is getting just overwhelmed up front, it really doesn't matter if your receivers are getting open. It really doesn't matter if you've got a great running back. This is going to be one of the games used as the Derrick Henry is washed thing. And listen, we may get to the end of the season and say age has taken its toll, etc. That's a possibility. I don't want it to be, but it could happen. I'm not an idiot. If you watch the tape of this game, he's getting hit in the backfield on every snap. I mean, I think there were like 2 plays in total where he was not contacted before he reached the line of scrimmage. The average yards before contact was like minus yards. So, you're trying to run plays, you can't block them. You're trying to throw the ball, you can't protect. and it just completely derails the entire offense. There's no offensive structure or scheme that you can get around that. I don't care how good your offense. I don't care if you've got Kyle Shanahan. I don't care if you've got Sean McVay, Andy Reid. If the front four of the other team is overwhelming your 5 guys or 6 guys or 7 guys, however many guys you put back there, because the Titans tried all those things, it didn't work. You can't play football. You just can't play football. So another one, I made the joke earlier about, looking like Alabama versus, Northwest Missouri State or whatever. I said, similar to this, right? These guys are just much better than the other guys. And when it's in that combination, you're not going to win. You're not going to win a football game. You're not going to gain yards. You're not going to do anything. And 27-3 Browns, really almost flattering, I would say, because it was such a sheer level of domination by the Browns defense over the Titans offensive line, specifically, and offense more generally. A tough one to swallow. But as you mentioned, Tim, when the offensive line is bad for any team, you end up with this situation. And we also saw it earlier in the season, a team closer to your heart than mine, but happened in week 1 as well. So I'm sure you want to hate on the Titans, but I mean, it links back to a game we spotlighted in week 1 as well.
No, exactly. And I think that's the key here is there's the themes carry on, right? Week 1, the Steelers get beat by the San Francisco 49ers 30-7. And you can watch that game and you go, maybe that you want to apply the Niners are just better than the Steelers. And I think that's, number one, true. I think the Niners are better than the Steelers, but that's not necessarily what happened in this game. In this game, you had, number one, poor game planning on the part of the Steelers offense. Matt Canada has been a disaster for a period of time, but that bad game planning led to an offensive line that could do nothing. We were then unable to establish a running game, which were then unable to establish a passing game. I mean, it's interesting. The best drive the Steelers had by far was their last drive of the first half, and they go 95 yards in just under 2 minutes for a touchdown. And that's a drive where obviously the San Francisco 49ers defense is playing a different package, right? They're trying to more of a prevent, right? There's a little bit more room. They're not pinning their ears back every snap. And if you look at how the Steelers blocked up in the first half versus how they blocked up in the second half, it was a completely different approach. And so you can blame it on the coaches, you can blame it on the execution. But the point is the offensive line in the first half of that game absolutely did no favors to the team. The time of possession was unfathomably bad. And, the Niners obviously dominated the first half and went in. It was 20-7 at the half. The second half was only 10-0. And the Steelers had chances and ultimately weren't able to score. And so you got the stat line you did. The other thing that happened in that game that was a little bit different was once San Francisco has a lead, they don't give them up. And one of the reasons they're able to do that is because they have an offensive line that absolutely controls the line of scrimmage. They're able to run clock forever. So even when they weren't scoring a ton of points in the second half, they still dominated the time of possession. And so you think about, again, that sort of failure of the offensive line to let you extend those drives, to give your defense a breather, to get off the field or have the offense stay on the field, as the case may be, is incredibly, incredibly important across. And I think you'll see that theme throughout a lot of these games where the scoreline gets a little bit out of hand.
Well, we saw it last night, right, as well. I mean, we're not going to talk about this game, but the Eagles-Buccaneers game from Monday Night Football, the Eagles won. The Eagles are a better team. I didn't qualify as a beatdown based on the score because I think based on our qualification, I didn't think we quite got there. But the point being, the Eagles took over in that game with 9 minutes left and basically ran the clock out because they just ran it every snap. And they ran the clock out for almost an entire quarter because the offensive line destroyed the Bucs defensive line, which has been one of the strengths of that team. So whether it's the Titans, the Steelers, the Buccaneers, or the Giants, which is the other week one example we were going to touch on, right, in terms of offensive lines just getting mauled. If you have an offensive line which can control a game, you can dominate time possession, you can exhaust the opposing defense, and if your offensive line is doing diddly squat, then you're going to have a really, really long day at the office, which is exactly what happened to all three of the teams we just mentioned, the Titans this week and the Steelers and the Giants.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, Luke. I completely missed that pass initially when you tossed it over this way. But the Giants game, the offensive line was 100% of that story, right? That now the weather was bad. You could say the team gave up in the second half. I mean, it was 20-0 at the end of the first half. It was,
I mean, you were there, right? You saw it with your own
20-0
eyes.
at the end of the first half, 40-0 at the end of the game. That team got dominated across the front. Danny Dimes had no time. The running game got nothing going. And, you put a team like the Cowboys who have 17 pass rushers, you're just in major trouble. So, wanted to point that out. I mean, I think the offensive line, gets blamed a lot, rarely gets credit. But absolutely key to not finding yourself on the wrong side of these things. And all it comes down to time of possession. And if you look at the teams this year, the 13 worst time of possession across the league this year, all were losses. The only team to possess the ball for less than 25 minutes, and at 25, your opponent has 35, so it's a 10-minute time of possession differential. So the only team with worse than 10 minutes time of possession differential to the negative, the only team to win was Pittsburgh to beat Cleveland in what was a very weird, fluky kind of game.
Yeah, strange defensive touchdowns.
In week 2.
Yeah, strange.
So there are times where your offense scores very quickly and you don't need the time of possession and you can win. But generally speaking, the team that wins the time of possession, especially if you win it in a meaningful way, is going to win the game. And that almost always comes back to failure on one side of the ball, and it's almost always the offensive line giving you the tools you need to extend drives, stay out on the field, convert third downs. There were the last night, 1 third down, 1 for 11. It's not going to get it done. And those almost always lead
for sure.
else.
Yeah, and when you're a fan of the team on the flip side of that, as I am, and as you were in week 1, I mean, you just think we just can't do anything. Like the sense of futility, I think, when the offensive line is bad or is just getting beaten by a better defensive line is pretty miserable. So certainly, if you're watching your team and you're wondering what the hell is going wrong and nothing seems to work, just watch the offensive line and you'll find out pretty quickly why. I mean, we could have touched on it in the Bears-Chiefs game too, and the Bears season in general. Their offensive line play has been horrible, and that's a big reason why the team is not very good. You rarely see a good team with a bad offensive line, and you rarely see a bad team with a good one. There's a reason for that. But Tim, we've discussed at length.
We've exhausted the
crappy football. Maybe so. Maybe not exhausted, but we're going to stop for the sake of our listeners. And we're going to do something a little bit more positive, as we always do week to week. We like to crown the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week. That is the player who has exhibited the most Jonas Gray-like performance. Jonas Gray, out of the clear blue sky, 4 touchdowns, 200-yard rushing performance, only to vanish from the face of the earth once again thereafter. To be clear, full disclaimer as we always issue, we hope all our Jonas Gray players go on to do great things. We don't want you to be a flash in the pan, but if you were, at least you had a flash. So nothing wrong with that. This week didn't fit into any of our previously discussed games, but only one choice, really. Andrew Beck, fullback, Houston Texans, Tim.
Another team that got a win out
if you're
of
250. Yeah, exactly. And we could talk about Houston maybe in a future pod, but been impressed with them in the early going in what is a heinous AFC South. Who knows, they may end up winning it. But if you're a 255-pound fullback who scores a kick return, Tim, you are going to be the Jonas Gray Player of the Week. 20 miles per hour he got up to on the return. 20.37. For those who didn't see this play, go and look it up because it's absolutely fucking great, is the only way I can put it. Andrew Beck is not the kick returner for the Houston Texans. Let's be absolutely clear. He is the guy in front of the kick returner who is meant to be blocking. The kick is short. He picks it up around the 15-yard line or so. He almost intercepts the ball from the actual return man who's trying to catch it. He backpedals into him. So he drops it. Then he picks it up. Then he breaks about
17.
I'm going to say 5 tackles to the end zone and scores. Tim, he's the first fullback to return a kick for a touchdown since 2005. Yes, it has happened before.
Back when we had fullbacks on all the teams.
Was playing for the Jags.
For the Jags.
Was playing for the Jags. Yeah, Derek Wimbush of the Jags, 2005. A 91-yard touchdown return in a 24-17 victory over Arizona in week 12 of 2005. I just want to do a quick sidebar on Derek Wimbush before I give Andrew Beck his flowers,
Please.
if I may. I'm only going to do this just to show how good NFL football players are, because I feel like this is a good indicator, right? So Derek Wimbush played in the league for 2 years. He was a fullback. He had the kick return. That's his,
his Jonas Gray Player of the Week moment.
If we'd been running it in 2005, he would have got it. He played for 2 years. Then he went to the Albany Panthers of something called the Southern Indoor Football League. Don't know what that is. I think it's since folded. Then he played for a couple other indoor football teams in Georgia. This is pre-XFL. This is or post-XFL, pre-XFL too. Post-NFL Europe, all that. So this is a guy who basically turned up in the NFL, played a bit, disappeared, never heard from again, essentially. He went to Fort Valley State, which is a Division II college. In his senior year, he had 1,800 rushing yards and 22 touchdowns, and he was the runner-up for the Harlan Hill Trophy, which is basically the Heisman.
And this is back when college teams were playing 10, 11 games, too.
Yeah. So he had 1,800 yards, 22 touchdowns as a senior, was the second best D2 player in the country in his year, and his NFL career was 2 years. So next time you're shitting on an NFL player, remember how good these guys actually are. I just wanted to get that in there. Andrew Beck, though, he's from Tampa, Florida, Tim. Same as Jerome Ford, who was last week's Jonas Gray Player of the Week.
Regionally localized.
Chagrin. Yeah, he was a 3-star high school recruit. He was actually listed as a linebacker when he was coming out, inside linebacker, before he went to Texas, which is where he played his collegiate ball. In his senior year of high school, 126 tackles, 32 TFLs, and 6 sacks, which I thought was pretty fucking great. 32 TFLs in a high school season is quite a lot.
Yeah.
He went to Texas. He was there for 5 years. He had a medical red shirt in there. He blocked for Deontay Foreman as a junior. Deontay Foreman led the country in rushing, so embracing his fullback role. He was all Big 12 as a redshirt senior. He obviously, goes without saying, did not go to the combine. I think that's probably understood if you're a fullback. 4.63 at his pro day 40 time, 23 reps, 34-inch vert, 9 feet 11-inch broad jump. So, that's pretty good athlete, 255. Yeah. Not bad. Went undrafted. Actually was signed by the Patriots. How Patriotsy is that, by the way, signing this kind of player? But he was waived in final cuts. He was
what year?
What
year was he drafted?
High-priced.
2019.
115 grand the Patriots paid him, which was one of the highest paid undrafted free agents. So yeah, those guys don't make a lot of money in NFL terms by any stretch. He spent 3 years with the Broncos. He scored a touchdown a couple of years ago. People may or may not remember that. I vaguely remembered his name. He was on and off of IR. In 2022, he won the Salute to Service Award, Tim, for his work with the USO in Colorado when he was with the Denver Broncos. So good to him. And he signed this offseason with Houston on a 2-year deal. So that's the kind of the précis, the bio of Andrew Beck. I want to give 2 more little statements before we officially hand over the Memorial Teaspoon. 2 quotes. One quote is from the announcer on this game, and I forgot who it was, so forgive me. But he is obviously calling a fullback returning a kick for a touchdown and enjoying himself very much, as he should. And he gets in the end zone, and the announcer goes, "Did we just see what we just saw?" Which I thought was a great one-liner.
It's like a golf announcer.
Which I very much like.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Better than most. And then I think quote of the year is in the bag, which is Andrew Beck in the post game at his locker being interviewed, presumably for the first time ever after the game. They asked him, what happened on the kick return or whatever. And he says, "I saw some space. Then I just started hauling ass and it worked out all right."
I mean, what can you say? Well done.
Just started hauling ass, Tim. And it worked out all right to the tune of an 85-yard touchdown. And more importantly, the Jonas Gray Memorial Teaspoon. Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week, Week 3, 2023. Andrew Beck, kudos to you, sir. That was a great effort. And one of my favorite plays of the season. I think we'll struggle to see something more entertaining than that, even in this early stage. But Tim, handing that out, little nugget off the back of that as we get into the kind of quick hitters, rando facts section of the podcast, which is just around returns.
Yep.
I mean, the kick return, the punt return touchdown, I love those plays. I think most people who watch football love those plays. If you're old enough, you enjoyed watching, Deion Sanders, or if you're even older, like the Billy White Shoes Johnson of the world. Devin Hester with more recent vintage. Dante Hall, Josh Cribbs. Great returners in their own right. And it's an exciting example.
And it is a skill.
With the
I think a lot of people think of it as it doesn't matter who's back there. It's the backup. It's the 5th wide receiver. It's
Tim, I'm assuming you never play kick or punt return. I'm just putting out there as your role as center and
I'm offended,
linebacker.
But that's true.
Yeah, I did both, and I can tell you it's absolutely terrifying. You're just sprinting at guys sprinting at you. So it is a skill, and it takes some nerve. And it's a shame because obviously, listen, player safety is important. Reducing concussions is important. We're not saying any of that. But as an exhilarating football player, it's hard to beat a kick return. And I just felt like this season, we've seen a bit of a renaissance. Right? So I decided to do a little bit of research. I mean, heaven forbid, but I did a little bit of research. Last year in total, Tim, we had 3 punt return touchdowns and 6 kick return touchdowns in total. So 9 return scores over the course of the whole season. 2 of the kick return touchdowns were Naheem Hines in the same game. So a third of the kick returns were in one game. This season, we've already had 5 return touchdowns, 3 punts and 2 kick returns. Both the kick returns were this weekend. And we mentioned them both, Marvin Mims and Andrew Beck. So we're already up to 5 through 3 weeks, and we only had 9 all of last year. So maybe we're gonna see a few more of these. So let's keep those rolling, because I'm very much enjoying the renaissance of this particular NFL play, which has kind of died a death. And I think part of it is because teams are being more tactical.
Well, right, I mean, more touchbacks, certainly kickoffs, more fair catches, but
kickoffs. I mean, my Titans are doing, and a lot of other teams are as well, kick the ball short intentionally. They've introduced the fair catch rule on kick returns, right, where you wave for a fair catch, you get it at the 25. Teams aren't really using that yet. I'm sure they will, but a lot of teams are catching it at the 3, catching it at the 2, and running it out because they've kind of an autopilot. So you are seeing a bit more returns, even returns on punts and kicks which aren't scoring. There have been quite a lot of long ones. There were a couple in the games yesterday. I feel like we are seeing a bit more of that. So I think as teams get more attuned maybe to the rule set, they can do that. But it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues, and I'm certainly enjoying watching.
No, tons of fun. I mean, I was in the building Monday night with the Jets when they beat the Bills on a punt return in overtime. I mean, one of the funnest ways you ever watch a walk-off. I mean, long passes for touchdowns are fun, long runs are fun, but the return...
Another Jonas Gray player of the week,
absolutely.
In fact.
So apparently returning kicks, good way to get your name on the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week. Teaspoon rack, which will be available at the end of the year.
Teaspoon rack. We will have to eventually, if this ever gets big enough, those will be available for purchase. I want to put that out there now.
We got to start mailing them to the players, because you mail it to Beck, he probably pulls it out. He's like, "Look at this thing," and then who knows? That's our moment.
Maybe we'll try that. One for the research file for next week.
We'll see. But yeah, Luke. I mean, a couple other things happened this week that I just think you have to mention, and 2 of them are kicking related. So we'll transition off your kick returns into kicking. One is there were 2 teams who, trailing just miserably badly at the end of the game, kicked field goals to avoid the shutout. The Bears did it, and somebody else did it. I don't remember. The command was the Raiders. Yeah,
well, the Raiders did it when they shouldn't have.
In any case, kicking a field goal.
The Commanders also did it. They were down, I think, 37.
It was the Commanders is the one I was thinking about. 37-3.
But no, the Raiders was another ill-advised field goal, but for very different reasons, which we're not going to get into. But that was just poor game management, not blowout prevention.
When you're getting skunked, when you're sitting on a 0 at the end of the game, and you're in field goal range, and it's 4th and I don't give a damn what number, is kicking the field goal smart? Get your name off the shutout list, keep your coach employed for another game, cowardly. No. Like, how do you describe the avoid shutout field goal?
It's the second most irritating play to me in surrender mode. You're in surrender mode. It's pretty depressing. We talked about teams getting their ass beat. You're in surrender mode. Those games suck. When you've been embarrassed, when you've been blown to smithereens, I don't give a shit if it's 4th and 80. Run a play. Like, okay, you can't kick a field goal on 4th and 80.
Give it a go.
You get my point. Run a play. Like, screw it. Like, there is no difference. There is no difference from getting beaten 37-0 or getting beaten 37-3. If you are working for a GM or an owner or whoever makes the final firing decision, and that person makes the determination of if you keep your job on you kicking a field goal when you're getting destroyed, they're idiots. And they probably don't exist, because I don't imagine many teams are. If you're getting obliterated, just run a play. Run a play. And I mentioned it's the second most depressing. The one that pisses me off almost as much, which is not as, is a little bit understandable, is when it's like 3rd and 18 and you run like a draw. Those really get my goat, but that's a sidebar. In answer to your question, Tim, it's a sign of cowardly coaching. It's, I don't want my name next to the word shutout. I think in the Eberflus case, which is the Bears, it's a desperation. Please don't fire me. See, we showed some green shoots, and he is on a seat which is red
hot, no doubt.
Red hot right now. Riverboat Ron, probably a little bit more safe. I just don't really like that, but he'll take some old school coaching mantra about scoring points and mental blah, 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 whatever. So I kind of give him a little bit more of a pass. Generally speaking, I'm not going to go do this research because it's too hard, but I bet you coaches who do that
get fired
not that long afterwards, in a very common fashion. We're not a preview show, but I just touched on it because we mentioned it this weekend, Tim. Oh my God. It's not a downtrodden bowl because these teams aren't the downtrodden franchise index.
They will be.
But it's Bears Broncos. It's Bears Broncos, baby, on Sunday. Man. Get your popcorn ready, as T.O. would say. I just want to say one thing, and I'll let you move on to the quick hits because I'm monopolizing.
This quick hit is not so quick. Go ahead.
Sorry, but I just want to say the Bears opened at home to the Broncos as underdogs. It's the worst thing I've ever heard. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. That team just lost by 50 points and they've opened as underdogs at home. So just wanted to get that in there before the podcast ended. So look forward to reviewing that game next week. I'm
very confident
to answer
the
your
Broncos
question,
are the first team to ever lose by 50 and then open as a favorite.
Oh,
100% on the road.
On the road? On the road. That's what killed me about that. But yes, in answer to your question, no, it's never acceptable. Don't kick field goals when you're getting beat down just trying to play.
You have to agree. The next biggest headline in field goal kicking in the NFL, Justin Tucker, who by almost every measure is the best kicker ever, most accurate kicker ever, holds the current record for the longest made field goal, which happened to be a game winner.
Game winners out the
there are YouTube videos off the world of just game winning Justin Tucker field goals. It's just every game winning kick he's had, and they're over 5 minutes long. Field goals aren't very long plays, so we got he's real good. Had a chance with a game winner this week. Would have been 61 yards. His career long 66. He's kicked several over 60. I remember when we used to talk about Justin Tucker as super accurate, but not necessarily super long. I think he put that to bed with his recent performances. This one, however, the 61-yarder comes up just short. Any thoughts on A, Tucker missing a game-winning field goal, which he never does, and B, to miss it down the middle coming up short from 61?
Yeah, I think the only guy in the NFL we're surprised missed it, I would say. So it's kind of, you're damning him, but you're also praising him because there's no other kicker in the NFL you'd expect to make that, to be honest. Not Butker, not anyone else you want to name, unless it's in Denver. Maybe you give guys a chance because of the thin air. But it wasn't very good conditions. It was a little bit wet. And what was interesting with the kick is I was watching it live. It looked good. It was a beautiful kick. It was right down Main Street. It was high. It was end over end. It was perfect. And he looked at it after it didn't go through in a state of confusion, being like, what do you mean I didn't go through? So that was surprising. I don't think it means really anything in the grand scheme of things. As you say, this is a guy who is a Hall of Fame kicker. This is a guy who is, almost reset the bar for what we expect from a kicker. Not just in the clutch, because I think Vinatieri did that, but just week to week, just ridiculously good at his job. Don't think it means a huge amount. Was surprised he didn't get it, but he's the only guy I'm surprised would miss a 61-yarder to win a game. Interesting though, the other side, Matt Gay for the Colts won the game. It was slightly controversial, went to that game with some non-penalty calls and so on. But Matt Gay kicked 4 50-yard field goals. I think he was the first guy ever to do that in one game, to win them. So Justin Tucker falls slightly short, but Matt Gay, kind of rando, bounced around the league a little bit.
Almost the Jonas Graham Moore.
He made 4 longies.
Yeah, no, he made 4 from 50. There were a lot of field goals this week. I didn't do the math, but that was one of the things that stuck out to me. Lots of teams kicking lots of field goals this week.
Notably, not Miami.
Not Miami. Just
a lot of
touchdowns.
Teams kick field goals. Just
all right.
10
last
of the best.
one, and this bring the pod full circle. We spent a little bit of time talking about this at the beginning. I think everyone now knows Taylor Swift attended the Chiefs game sitting in the box with Travis Kelce's mom. So solid on all counts, whether this is a real thing or the best sort of hype news story of all time. Who cares?
It's good fun.
However, Pat McAfee, who is basically, the best at what we do.
Our rival.
Yeah. Says this on his show this week. He says, the Chiefs are now going to win the Super Bowl again because of the vibe that Taylor Swift has brought to the team. Is that the worst take? First of all, getting to the right conclusion for the wrong reasons. They probably are going to win the Super Bowl again. It has nothing to do with Travis Kelce, maybe not dating Taylor Swift. Any thoughts?
I love the idea. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously absolutely absurd.
Worst take ever, maybe?
But I love the idea that she's giving a vibe to the team. Like, what do you mean the team? Is she giving a pre-game speech? She's going in. It would be great if next week Andy Reid's got her on the sideline with a headset going, okay, Pat, we're seeing a lot of cover three. We're going to run Jet 2-3 chip wasp, just like the Super Bowl. Let's run that. I'd love to see that, but no, I think I agree with the prognostication of the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl.
Very possible.
They're the team that I would still consider the favorites for it. Been there, done that. Maybe there's some bias there, but it's early days. Going to be a little bit of a contrarian, Tim, and suggest that the attendance at one game of Taylor Swift against the Bears at home, who, as a reminder, we've already mentioned, have just opened as underdogs at home against the team that lost by 50 points.
Yep.
Probably doesn't signify.
Nope. I happen to agree with you on that one, Luke. I read that quote and I thought, okay, this has to be commented upon.
That's a sign that we've officially run out of things to talk about in the world.
Which is funny
NFL,
because we could have talked about 1,000 other things, but hey,
it.
we'll shut her down on that one. As we said at the top, do find us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on your podcast apps of choice, check us out on YouTube. But please do continue to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Like, rate, review, all those fun things. Hit the follow button, the little alarm bell, red flag, thumbs up, all the little buttons, except the ones that are bad. Don't push those. We appreciate all the ratings. Our ratings are fantastic on all of our the apps that we're on. Reviews are great too. So if you can spare a couple seconds, type a couple of words in the box. Always really beneficial for us. If you enjoy what we're doing, help us keep doing it by hitting those buttons for us. We really appreciate it. But
hit us on the socials at Half Yard Line Pod. Hit us on the email halfyardlinepod@gmail.com as well. Wherever there is social media, wherever there is video, wherever there are podcasts, you can find the Half Yard Line. So just search Half Yard Line Pod anywhere you do internet stuff. We'll be there, and we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, and let us know too. If you like what we're doing, tell us that. If you want us to do things a little bit differently, more of this, less of that, we'd love the feedback. So feel free to reach out and let us know your thoughts. I'll be glad to hear from you.
Hit us up.
Until next week, that's going to do it for us here on the Half Yard Line. Be good.
We've got a blank space, baby, and we'll write your name. That's a Taylor Swift.
Bye.